Once upon a time, in a land where the morning sun painted the rooftops gold and the night sky shimmered with 1,000 quiet stars, there lived a kind-hearted girl named Cinderella. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Little Dreamland Tales for more magical bedtime stories every night. Now, Cinderella's days were not filled with magic or joy, at least not at first. She lived in a grand old house with her stepmother and two stepsisters, who were not kind to her at all. They made her wake before dawn, sweep the halls, wash the dishes, and polish every piece of silver until her reflection sparkled back at her. Her name wasn't always Cinderella, but one evening, after a long day of chores, she sat by the fireplace to warm her tired hands, and the ashes dusted her cheeks. Her stepsisters giggled cruelly, saying, "Look at her, she's covered in cinders, Cinderella." And though their laughter echoed through the halls, she smiled quietly to herself, because deep inside, she knew that kindness mattered more than cruelty ever could. Each morning, when the sun rose, she whispered to the little birds perched on her window, "Good morning, my friends," and they chirped back as if to say, "Don't worry, Cinderella, one day, things will change." Her stepmother, a tall woman with cold eyes that gleamed like polished glass, cared only for her own daughters, Drizella and Anastasia, who were spoiled and selfish. They spent hours in front of the mirror, arguing over ribbons and jewels, while Cinderella mended their dresses and brushed their hair, never complaining. "Hurry up, Cinderella," they would shout. "You'll make us late." And Cinderella, always patient, would answer softly, "Yes, sisters, I'm coming." But in her heart, she dreamed. She dreamed of walking through the royal gardens, of seeing the grand palace up close, of hearing music and laughter that wasn't cruel or sharp. One bright morning, a royal messenger arrived at the gate, his trumpet glinting in the sunlight. He unrolled a scroll and read aloud, "By order of His Majesty the King, all the maidens of the land are invited to a grand ball at the palace, where His Highness the Prince shall choose his bride." Drizella and Anastasia squealed with excitement, clapping their hands. "A royal ball! We must have new gowns. We must be the most beautiful ladies there." Their mother smiled slyly. "Of course, my darlings, we shall prepare at once." Cinderella's heart fluttered. "Oh, how wonderful!" she whispered. "May I go too?" Her stepmother turned slowly, pretending to think. "You, my dear, a ball is no place for a servant girl. You have nothing to wear. And besides, who would watch the house?" The stepsisters laughed. "Yes, Cinderella, who would clean our shoes?" Tears glimmered in Cinderella's eyes, but she didn't argue. "Of course, stepmother," she said quietly. In the days that followed, the house buzzed with excitement. Fabric, feathers, lace, and ribbons filled every room. Cinderella helped stitch her sisters' gowns, even though they teased her endlessly. On the night of the ball, when the carriage waited outside, Cinderella stood at the top of the stairs, her hands clasped. "Stepmother," she said softly, "please, may I go? I helped so much, I promise I won't get in the way." Her stepmother's lips curved into a cruel smile. "You, in rags? Why, the prince would mistake you for a maid." "No, dear, stay here and clean the ashes." And with that, she swept out the door, her daughters giggling behind her. The carriage rolled away, leaving Cinderella alone in the quiet house. For a long moment, she stood still, listening to the distant clatter of hooves fading into the night. Then she sank onto a stool by the fire and began to cry. "Oh, I wish," she whispered through her tears, "I wish I could go too." The room seemed to sigh with her sadness. Then, a soft twinkle of light appeared near the window, first one, then another, until the whole room shimmered as if 1,000 stars had floated inside. Cinderella looked up, blinking. "Who's there?" she asked. A gentle voice answered, warm and bright. "Why, my dear, it's your fairy godmother." And before Cinderella's astonished eyes, an elegant woman appeared, her gown woven from starlight, her wand glowing softly in her hand. "You've been so kind, my child," said the fairy godmother. smiling, and kindness never goes unnoticed. Now, dry those tears, you shall go to the ball, Cinderella gasped. But, how? I have no gown, no carriage, nothing. The fairy godmother chuckled. Nonsense, we'll fix that in no time. Fetch me a pumpkin from the garden. Cinderella hurried outside, her heart fluttering with hope, and returned with a golden pumpkin. The fairy godmother tapped it lightly with her wand, and with a flash of light, it transformed into a grand carriage, shining like gold under the moonlight. Oh, Cinderella breathed. It's beautiful. Now, let's see, said the fairy godmother thoughtfully, looking around. Ah, those mice by the hearth will do nicely. She waved her wand, and the mice transformed into strong white horses, their tiny whiskers replaced with glittering bridles. The old dog by the door became a proud coachman, bowing deeply. And now, said the fairy godmother with a wink, for the most important part. She lifted her wand again, and Cinderella's worn dress shimmered, changing color and shape until it became the most exquisite gown imaginable, silver and blue, with tiny crystals that caught the light like raindrops on moonbeams. On her feet appeared delicate glass slippers, so fine they sparkled like stars. Cinderella could hardly speak. It's the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. The fairy godmother smiled kindly. You deserve it, my dear. But remember, magic is a gift, and it doesn't last forever. When the clock strikes 12, the spell will end, and everything will return as it was. Cinderella nodded earnestly. I understand. Thank you, fairy godmother. With that, she stepped into the carriage, her heart racing with joy, and off she went into the glittering night. The palace was alive with light and music. Guests twirled beneath crystal chandeliers, and laughter floated through the halls. When Cinderella's carriage pulled up, every head turned. Who is she? Whispered the crowd as she entered the ballroom, her gown glimmering like starlight. Even the prince, who had been politely greeting guests, stopped in his tracks. He had never seen anyone so graceful, so radiant, yet so gentle in her eyes. He approached her with a bow. May I have this dance? Cinderella smiled shyly. Yes, Your Highness. And as the music began, they danced. Around and around the ballroom they went, as if the world itself had vanished and only the two of them remained. The night passed in a dream. They talked and laughed and shared quiet moments in the palace garden, beneath a sky full of stars. What is your name? The prince asked softly. Cinderella hesitated. Just someone who must leave before midnight, she said, her heart trembling with both joy and fear. But before she could explain, the great clock began to chime once, twice, 3 times. Her eyes widened. Oh no, it's almost midnight. She curtsied quickly. I must go. Wait, cried the prince, reaching for her hand. At least tell me. But she was already running, her gown shimmering as she fled down the grand staircase. The clock struck 12, and the magic began to fade. Her carriage turned back into a pumpkin, her horses into mice, her gown into rags. But as she ran through the palace gates, one glass slipper slipped from her foot and was left behind, gleaming softly in the moonlight. The next morning, the entire kingdom buzzed with excitement. The prince had declared he would marry only the girl whose foot fit the glass slipper. Messengers carried the shoe from house to house, testing it on every maiden in the land. When they arrived at Cinderella's home, her stepsisters were waiting eagerly. It's mine, said Drizella, forcing her foot into the delicate slipper. But it was far too small. Let me try, cried Anastasia, but her foot barely fit past the toe. The messenger sighed. Is there no one else in this house? The stepmother smirked. Only our maid. But surely she couldn't have been at the ball. Just then, Cinderella appeared at the doorway, her hands still dusted with flour. May I try? She asked softly. The stepmother sneered, but the messenger nodded. Of course. He knelt and held out the slipper. Cinderella slipped her foot in effortlessly. It fit perfectly. At that very moment, the fairy godmother's magic shimmered once more. Cinderella's simple clothes transformed into the sparkling gown from the ball, and the stepsisters gasped. "It was you!" they cried. The messenger smiled broadly. "My lady, the prince has been searching for you." Before long, a royal carriage arrived, and Cinderella was taken to the palace. When the prince saw her, his eyes lit up with joy. "I knew it was you," he said. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Cinderella smiled, her heart full of happiness. "I would have come sooner," she said, "but I didn't think you'd remember a girl like me." The prince laughed gently. "How could I ever forget?" And there, under the same starry sky where they had first danced, he knelt and asked for her hand in marriage. The kingdom rejoiced. Bells rang, flowers bloomed, and the sun seemed to shine brighter than ever before. Cinderella's stepmother and stepsisters, ashamed of their cruelty, apologized tearfully. Cinderella forgave them, for her heart was too kind for bitterness. "We all make mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is that we learn to be better." And she meant it. Soon after, Cinderella and the prince were married in a grand ceremony filled with laughter, music, and love. People from every corner of the kingdom came to celebrate, and even the little birds and mice who had been her friends flew in to watch. As the evening fell and the stars came out, Cinderella looked up at the sky. Remembering the night everything had changed, the night magic found her because of her kindness and courage. The fairy godmother appeared one last time, smiling proudly. "You see, my dear," she whispered, "true magic begins with a kind heart." Cinderella smiled. "I'll remember that always." And so, the girl who once sat by the ashes became a beloved princess, not because of a gown or a glass slipper, but because she never stopped believing in goodness. And from that day on, she and the prince lived happily ever after.